I stayed before I knew why. I'll start where most women lie, on their backs, eyes open, listening to the person they love breathe like the world is safe. He used to sleep with his arm heavy across my waist, like possession disguised as comfort. His hand would rest just below my ribs, fingers relaxed, trusting me not to disappear. Sometimes his thumb would move in slow, unconscious circles, as if my body were something familiar enough to be forgotten and remembered at the same time. I learned his breathing patterns before I learned his lies. There was the deep one, when he believed in himself. The shallow one, when he was thinking about something he wouldn't say. And the pause, barely a pause, when guilt passed through him like a weather change. That pause came long before I understood it. In the beginning, love was loud, not dramatic, just present. It filled rooms. It rearranged furniture without asking permission. We would lie on the floor because the couch felt too formal for what we were doing to each other, his fingers tracing the inside of my wrist, my knee pressed against his thigh, both of us pretending this was casual. It never is. Romance is never casual. It's just unarmed at first. He loved the way I listened, not the way I talked, the way I listened, as if my attention were a kind of permission, as if my silence made him more real. He would talk about his dreams in the dark, and I would turn slightly toward him so he could feel my breath on his neck. That small shift made him speak longer. Men notice when you angle your body toward them. They think it means safety. It does, until it doesn't. I loved the weight of him when he leaned into me, his head against my shoulder, the trust of it, the assumption that I would hold him up without needing anything in return. I loved how he said my name when he was tired, soft, almost unfinished. Those were the nights I thought love was something that accumulated, that if I kept showing up, something permanent would form, like sediment, like bone. I didn't know love could hollow instead of build. The first betrayal didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with a change in temperature. He kissed me the same, but he didn't linger. He touched me, but his hand left sooner. He laughed, but not at the same places. It felt like being in a familiar room where someone had quietly removed the windows. I didn't confront him, not because I was afraid, but because confrontation would have ended something, and I wasn't ready to know what. So I stayed. Romance doesn't disappear all at once. It decays unevenly. One night he would pull me close and whisper that I was everything. Another night he would turn away like my warmth belonged to someone else. That inconsistency is intoxicating. It makes you work harder. It convinces you love is a puzzle you can still solve. I learned to read him the way people read sacred texts, looking for meaning in pauses, interpreting silence like prophecy. When he was distant, I became softer. When he was cruel, I became understanding. When he forgot me, I reminded him without asking. There is a particular intimacy in trying to earn what you once received freely. We still made love, slowly, carefully, as if both of us were afraid of waking something. His hands knew my body by memory, not curiosity. He touched places he had touched before, repeating gestures like rituals. I let him. I wanted to see if repetition could resurrect intention. Sometimes it did. There were nights when he held my face and kissed me like he was apologizing without language, when his forehead rested against mine and he stayed there, breathing me in, as if my existence alone were enough to steady him. Those nights are the most dangerous, because they convince you that what hurts you is temporary, and what saves you is still alive. I discovered the truth without discovering it. No messages, no lipstick, no whispered phone calls. Just a realization that I had become optional. Optional love is the coldest kind. It's affection without obligation, desire without accountability. You can feel it in the way someone stops asking where you are, not because they trust you, but because they don't need to know.
I should have left then. That's the part people want to hear. That's the clean version, the respectable arc. But here's the rule I broke. I stayed after understanding. Not to fix him, not to punish him, not to win. I stayed to observe. Romance, when drained of illusion, becomes something else entirely. It becomes behavioral, predictable, almost scientific. I began to see how he used closeness to regulate himself, how my presence softened his failures, how my forgiveness functioned like anesthesia. I watched the way he reached for me when he felt small. I watched the way he distanced himself when he felt powerful. And something inside me went quiet. Not numb, not broken. Quiet. We still shared a bed. I still curved my body toward him, but internally I stepped back just enough to see him whole. Not as a lover, not as a villain, as a system. There is an intimacy in withdrawal that feels like romance from the outside. I still cooked for him, still laughed at his stories, still touched his arm when I passed him in the hallway. He thought we were healing. But healing requires presence. I was already practicing absence. He didn't notice at first. People rarely notice when you stop needing them, as long as you continue to perform need. I became exquisite at this. At night, when he slept, I studied his face like an artifact. The man I loved still existed there. That was the tragedy. Love doesn't vanish when it's betrayed. It just loses its voice. Sometimes I would place my hand on his chest and feel his heartbeat under my palm. Strong, untroubled. And I would think, you have no idea what you're resting on. Romance continued. Darker. Slower. More ceremonial. He kissed me like someone touching something valuable they didn't fully own. I responded with precision. I gave him exactly what he expected. No more, no less. There is a cruelty in accuracy. The colder I became inside, the more present I appeared outside. My voice softened. My movements became deliberate. When he reached for me, I didn't hesitate. Hesitation invites questions. I didn't want questions. I wanted to see how long love could survive without mutuality. The answer is longer than you think. One night he told me he couldn't imagine life without me. His voice cracked just enough to sound sincere. He held me tightly, like he was afraid I might slip through him. I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heart adjust to my weight. I didn't say anything. Silence, when timed correctly, feels like depth. That night I realized something that changed everything. He loved the version of me that stayed. And I was about to remove her. Not dramatically, not all at once. Piece by piece. This is where the romance turns, not into hatred, into architecture. I didn't leave him. I left myself in stages. The woman who needed reassurance went first. Then the woman who explained her feelings. Then the woman who hoped. What remained was still warm, still affectionate, still desirable, but no longer reachable.
There was a particular kind of intimacy that exists only after betrayal has already happened, but before anyone admits it out loud. That was where we lived. My body still knew him. That knowledge didn't disappear just because my trust did. It remembered the shape of his shoulder in sleep, the exact pressure of his hand when he pulled me closer, the way his breathing changed when my leg crossed over his thigh. The body is loyal in ways the soul is not. I let that loyalty continue. At night, when he reached for me, I didn't flinch. I curved into him naturally, the way I always had. From the outside, nothing had changed. We still looked like two people who belonged to each other in the quiet hours. Tangled sheets, familiar warmth, shared silence.
But inside me, something had shifted position. Romance continued, but it lost its hunger. It became slow, careful, almost ceremonial. When he kissed me, it lingered too long, like he was trying to press something back into place. When he touched me, his hands searched, not explored. He wanted confirmation. I gave him precision instead. When we made love, I stayed present in every sensation. I felt everything. The heat, the rhythm, the way his body responded to mine like it always had. I didn't dissociate. I didn't withdraw. That would have been easier for him. Instead, I remained fully there, responsive, attentive, warm, while withholding the one thing he couldn't name but desperately needed: reciprocity. Afterward, he would lie beside me, tracing my skin, waiting for the familiar turn, my head on his chest, my arm draped over him, my body claiming him back. Sometimes I did it, sometimes I didn't. I learned that inconsistency is not confusing when it's loud. It's confusing when it's subtle, when it comes wrapped in tenderness, when it never announces itself as punishment. He began to notice the gaps, not what I did, but what I no longer filled. I stopped explaining myself, stopped translating my silence into comfort, stopped cushioning his doubts. Romance doesn't collapse when love ends. It collapses when emotional labor does. "You feel far," he said one night, trying to smile through it. I was sitting beside him, legs tucked under me, reading. I looked up slowly. "I'm here," I said. And I was. That was the problem. The colder I became internally, the more attentive he grew. He brought me small things, touched me more often, said my name as if it were something fragile. He became careful in ways he had never been when he was sure of me. Fear had entered the relationship quietly. He didn't know what he was afraid of. He only knew something important was slipping without sound. Romance shifted again then, into something desperate but still gentle. He tried to return us to earlier versions of ourselves, played old songs, repeated inside jokes, took my hand in public like he used to. I let him. One evening we danced in the kitchen. No music at first, just him swaying slightly, pulling me close, forehead resting against mine. I closed my eyes and let my body move with his. For a moment, it almost felt real again. That's the cruelty of memory. It can mimic presence perfectly. "You're still mine," he whispered, not asking. I didn't answer. Later that night, lying beside him, I realized something with a clarity so sharp it almost felt kind. I was no longer deciding whether to leave him. I was deciding whether to keep letting him believe I was still someone who could. That realization didn't bring anger, it brought calm. I stopped monitoring his behavior, stopped wondering what he was doing when he wasn't with me. Betrayal loses its sting when it loses its relevance. What remained was structure. I noticed how much of his stability came from me, how my presence softened his edges, how my forgiveness, once automatic, had functioned like permission, and how lost he became without it. He began to talk more, confess small fears, admit fragments of guilt without naming the source. He circled the truth like someone afraid to touch it. "I wasn't always fair to you," he said one night, staring at the ceiling. I turned my head and looked at him, really looked. "Yes," I said. Just that. No comfort followed, no anger either. That silence landed heavier than anything I could have said. He shifted closer to me, searching for something familiar in my face. His hand found mine, squeezed. I let it rest there. Stillness is unbearable when someone expects resolution. From that night on, he watched me more closely, studied my expressions, listened to my tone, tried to provoke reactions, laughter, irritation, jealousy. I gave him none, not out of spite, out of absence. Romance continued on the surface. We still shared a bed, still kissed hello and goodbye, still looked like a couple to anyone watching. But intimacy had changed location. It no longer lived between us. It lived inside me, quiet and sealed. He told me he loved me more often. His voice carried urgency now, like repetition might rebuild something. "I can't imagine life without you," he said once, holding me tightly. I rested my cheek against his shoulder, felt his heartbeat accelerate, waiting. I said nothing. That's when I felt it, clean and unmistakable. He was afraid. Not of losing me physically, of losing access to the version of me that made him whole. That fear followed him everywhere, into bed, into conversations, into silence. He woke before me sometimes, watching me sleep, searching my face like a map that had changed without warning. I let him look. One night, as he slept, his arm heavy across my waist like it always had been, I stared into the dark and understood the final truth of it all. I had not stayed because I was weak. I had not stayed because I was afraid to be alone. I had stayed long enough to remove myself without leaving. The woman he loved, the one who hoped, who forgave instinctively, who softened herself around his damage, she was gone. What remained was warm, polite, familiar, and unreachable. In the morning, he kissed me before leaving, lingering like he always did now. I watched him go without feeling the usual pull behind my ribs. The door closed. Something else closed with it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel broken. I felt finished. This is where the story ends, not with confrontation, not with departure, not with revenge that announces itself. It ends with a woman still in the room and a man slowly realizing that love can leave without taking the body with it, and that staying can be the coldest goodbye of all.